Many of us passionate vintage toy collectors have childhood memories that can be easily grouped into different periods of our young life, based upon the toy lines we were playing with at the time. For example, my early childhood is remembered as the Star Wars era, quickly followed by the Action Man period, and then by a few years when I was playing with Masters of the Universe toys. During my childhood, these periods were always backed up by a second toy line, such as my Star Wars era, when I also played quite extensively with Fisher-Price Adventure People. But there was one glaring exception to this rule. In 1987 I turned 10 years old, and for an entire year I was totally dedicated to one specific toy line, and that was Hasbro's Action Force International Heroes, which was a European rebranding of the popular G.I. Joe, a real American hero range of action figures and vehicles. In the United Kingdom, Hasbro offered 20 different carded action figures for the line's launch in 1987, and throughout that year I managed to collect 19 of them. But that 20th action figure has eluded me for 34 years, until today's video, where we're finally going to complete the Action Force International Heroes 1987 figure collection, so stay tuned.
Come with me, toy fans!
Hey toy fans, my name is Tony and welcome back to the Analog Toys YouTube channel, where we're obsessed with bringing you the true history of vintage toys and action figures. Now before we get started, I want to state up front that this isn't our usual type of video. This is not a documentary, a collecting guide, or a toy review. This video is about my personal journey to complete the 1987 Action Force International Heroes figure collection, a journey that's been 34 years in the making. I can clearly remember the day in early 1987 when my mum and I walked into a toy shop in England, and I first laid eyes on Hasbro's range of Action Force International Heroes. And the dynamic packaging art sent my childhood level of excitement through the stratosphere. Although I had been playing with Palitoy's Action Force toys earlier in my childhood, the line died away following the closure of Palitoy in 1985, and while there were some Action Force toys still in shops in 1986, my generation's interest had moved on to other brands by this point, and couple that with the fact that Hasbro's new packaging design was radically different to Palitoy's, at the time I thought I was looking at an entirely new toy line. I begged my mum to buy me one of these exciting new action figures and she agreed, and so began one of the most difficult decision-making processes of my young life. After what felt like an eternity, I had narrowed my choice down to two figures, Snake Eyes or Barbecue. It is important to note that at this point I knew nothing of the storyline surrounding these characters, and that's my excuse for picking Barbecue over the more popular Ninja Commando figure of Snake Eyes. I returned home with the Barbecue action figure and spent hours playing with him on the living room floor, and if memory serves me correctly, I spent an equal amount of time poring over the details of the exciting card back. For the release of these figures in the United Kingdom, Hasbro used the same artwork as was printed on the G.I. Joe card backs in the United States. And why wouldn't they? It holds up today as some of the best toy packaging art ever created. The G.I. Joe logo was swapped out for the Action Force International Heroes logo, and the reason for this is simple. The name G.I. Joe is distinctly American and was not popular in Britain. This is also why the flag points, which children could collect up and use to acquire mail-away offers, were changed to action points in the UK. But the biggest difference between these card backs is a detail that I wouldn't learn about until several years later. On the G.I. Joe file card, Barbecue's real name is Gabriel Kelly, and he was born in Boston, Massachusetts. But for the figure's UK release, his name was changed to Gabriel Garibaldi, and he was now an Italian character. And this is something that happened often in the Action Force line. Names and particularly places of birth were altered to fit the International Heroes moniker. Now the main reason I would spend so much time studying Barbecue's card back was so I could memorise the names of the other 19 figures that were available in the line. And I started writing lists of which figures I wanted to get next, and before too long I managed to add Dusty and Bazooka to the collection. Dusty quickly lost his small bipod accessory, an item that is still missing from my collection today. And at these prices, I doubt I'll ever acquire one, but back in 1987 it really didn't matter anyway. I was already hooked on Action Force at this point. And then on the 2nd of March that year, an event occurred that turned my passion into a downright obsession. And that event was the introduction of the Action Force Weekly comic, which was published by Marvel UK, and for the comic's launch we were offered issues 1 and 2 for the price of one comic. My parents bought me the first 2 issues from our local newsagent, and then set up a subscription so that each subsequent issue would be delivered to our house with my dad's newspaper order. I became completely enraptured by the stories drawn on the pages of these publications, and to this day, Action Force Weekly remains the only comic run that I've ever truly loved. The stories inside these comics were a mixture of original Marvel G.I. Joe stories and brand new tales of adventure that were written and drawn by Marvel UK. And issue 2 features my favourite comic book cover of all time, with Snake Eyes and Scarlet pursuing a cobra eel through the London Underground. And I was so taken by this story that the cobra eel would be the next action figure that I would add to my collection. Also included in the Action Force Weekly comics were a few print ads that featured some of the other figures and toys in the range. And after seeing these ads for the first time, I was inspired to start drafting my birthday wish list. So in June of 1987, I felt incredibly lucky when my parents gifted me the Ore Striker and the Cobra Stinger. And from my grandparents I received the 2 mini play sets, the Cobra Bunker and Checkpoint Alpha.
Action Force is a highly trained rapid deployment force fighting Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization.
Action Force!
Cobra Bang!
But they've been spotted by Flint, Dusty, and Barbecue.
Man the defense system!
Fighting for freedom over land and air.
That'll teach the Cobra some manners. Go, go!
Cobra Pang, Action Force Checkpoint and Air Defense System, figures sold separately.
Action Force!
As much as I enjoyed these vehicles and playsets, I was still totally obsessed with completing the set of 20 carded action figures. And lucky for me, I have quite a few uncles and aunties. Each of my adult relatives gifted me one figure, so on my birthday my collection expanded to include Flint, who remains one of my favourite Action Force figures, along with the Telly Viper, Quick Kick, Lady J and Airtight. And I was extremely grateful for these additions to my collection, but also a little frustrated. And that's because by then I had read the Snake Eyes origin story in the comics, and he had quickly become my favourite character, and my most highly desired action figure. But the problem was, every other Action Force fan in England had read the same comics, and we all wanted the Snake Eyes action figure, and his popularity made him exceedingly difficult to find in toy shops. He was the figure I wanted most, and everyone in my family knew it, but I was starting to feel as though we would never find him, so I began kicking myself over my earlier decision to choose Barbecue over Snake Eyes. My birthday is at the end of June, and I can still remember being 10 years old and wondering how I was going to make it another 6 months before getting some more Action Force toys for Christmas. Fortunately though, a few sporadic opportunities to acquire some Action Force merchandise presented themselves in the latter half of the year. First off, I mailed away a couple of action points in exchange for the exclusive Hooded Cobra Commander action figure, as well as sending away for and receiving my prized Action Force membership pack. Towards the end of that summer, my parents took the family on a day trip to France, and I was very excited to be travelling from Dover to Calais by hovercraft, but not nearly as excited as I was to find and purchase an Alpine action figure from the port of Calais. This would be the only Action Force figure I would acquire with a French cardback, which meant that I couldn't read his file card. But fortunately for me, an English version of Alpine's file card was included with the Action Force membership pack. And whilst researching this video, I also uncovered a strange coincidence. Not only did I pick up Alpine in France, but in a stroke of serendipity, for the European release of this figure, his birthplace was changed from Idaho, USA to Grenoble, France. Throughout this period, I was also continually adding new issues of the Action Force comic to my collection each week, and this run featured some truly amazing cover art, particularly issue 18, which had a wraparound cover depicting Cobra Fangs attacking the Mauler tank. The Action Force Weekly comic lasted for 50 issues, plus a couple of holiday specials, before transitioning to a monthly publication, and I collected every single one of them. For the most part, I adored these comics, but I must be honest and say that I really did not enjoy the Action Force and Transformers crossover story that started in issue 24. And in hindsight, the introduction of Transformers into the Action Force comic universe could very well be the reason that I have such disdain for Transformers all these years later. As Christmas 1987 approached, I once again started drafting Action Force wish lists. At this point, I had accumulated exactly half of the 20 available action figures in the range, and as well as hoping to complete this collection with Christmas presents, I also knew that my parents would most likely give me one big Christmas gift, and I remember asking for the transportable tactical battle platform. Well, when Christmas 87 arrived, I was overjoyed to find Destro under the Christmas tree. My parents also got me the Dreadnought pairing of Buzzer and Ripper, two figures that were most commonly found riding around on the Cobra Ferret. Now that was a missed opportunity. Who else wished that Hasbro had released a basic motorcycle for the Dreadnoughts to ride? Also under the Christmas tree was 2 presents from my grandparents, and they had gifted me with the Cobra water moccasin and Zartan with his swamp skier. At this stage I was still 7 figures short of completing the Action Force International Heroes set, and I was hoping to receive more figures from my uncles and aunties, but they wouldn't be arriving at the house until later in the day. So while I waited, I opened up the big gift from my parents, and it turns out that they had bought me the Cobra hydrofoil. I would later discover that my younger cousin Shane received the transportable tactical battle platform, but I wasn't complaining. The hydrofoil is still a really cool toy. Just before Christmas lunch, the rest of our extended family arrived. Everyone exchanged gifts, and I received several action figure shaped presents. The first gift I opened contained both Shipwreck and Footloose, and that was 15 figures down, 5 to go. And I was getting more excited by the moment because it looked as though there was another 5 figures in wrapping paper. I started tearing through Christmas wrapping paper like a human wood chipper. The next present revealed the Crimson Guard and the Snow Serpent beneath the paper. Along with the Cobra Eel, these are 2 of my favourite Cobra action figures, and I couldn't wait to station them at the Cobra bunker that I'd received for my birthday earlier in the year. I made short work of the wrapping on the next gift, and discovered that the Cobra Trooper had now joined the collection, and lo and behold, I had finally acquired Snake Eyes. And there was one final present to open. And this was it. Inside this final Christmas gift would be the 20th action figure that I needed to complete the collection. My nerves were shredded, and I distinctly remember shifting gears from wood chipper speed to turtle speed. I gingerly broke the wrapping paper seal and began to unfold it. I started to see that familiar Action Force card back, and my heart was racing. And then... Televiper?
Oh! Great Odin's Raven!
My boyhood soul was crushed. My auntie had bought me a duplicate action figure, but not a cool choice like another Eel, Crimson Guard or Snow Serpent. No, a Televiper, a figure that competes with Airtight for the title of lamest action figure in the 1987 range. The following year my family would emigrate to Australia, and whilst I still collected Action Force for another year or so, I would never acquire that elusive 20th action figure until now. So here we go, an action figure collection that for me anyway has been 24 years in the making. The final figure is in this box and I can't wait to get it open. And here we have version 1 Storm Shadow. He's complete with his accessories, quite nice condition. And I must say it really is a thrill to finally have version 1 Storm Shadow in my Action Force International Heroes collection. I don't know why it's taken me so long. I've had other collecting priorities, and I did at one point have this figure mint on the card, but I've always wanted to complete the set of 20 loose action figures that came out on cardbacks in the Action Force International Heroes line in 1987, and I'm chuffed to bits that I've completed the set. And filming this shot, where Storm Shadow finally comes in from the cold, almost brought a tear to my eye. While I have finally completed the loose figure collection, I have not collected the entire 1987 Action Force line, and I doubt I ever will, because this particular range included the Mauler tank, a toy that I would love to add to my collection, but I'm not prepared to pay such a ridiculous price for its driver. My memories of 1987 hold a special place in my heart, and that year will forever remain the last truly great toy-focused year of my childhood. In 1988, I added the Havoc to my Action Force collection, and if you want to hear that story, I've already made a video about the experience on this channel. And then in 1989, I acquired the Cobra Mamba, before swiftly losing my interest in toys and turning my attention to my new passion for being an Army cadet. And as much as I did enjoy the Action Force toys of 1988 and 89, nothing could ever compete with the stellar lineup that we British children were offered in 1987. So thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to check out some of our other Action Force content, you can click the playlist right here. Or to check out our video where we talk about the Havoc and Sergeant Slaughter's Triple T, you can click here. I'm Tony from Analog Toys, and full force!